Hi everyone, welcome back to our home. Today we are going to be talking everything rhubarb. These are two plants here that I planted last year from seed. Rhubarb has the smallest seeds. They're so tiny. Planted a whole bunch and we're able to bless a lot of family members with rhubarb. Even these tiny little rhubarb plants are starting to bolt already. Here we are in May in Minnesota, and our rhubarb just came out of the ground the beginning of May. Here, as we're approaching the end of May, our rhubarb is already bolting. So I'm going to show you what we're doing with it today. This bolting rhubarb here, I'm just picking off the seed pods. Usually I wait till they're a little bit bigger, and then I'm just tossing it around it. Good compost, right? Now, we won't be picking from that rhubarb at least until next year, but probably the year after that. So we want to make sure it grows nice and big, like this one. So Matt and I planted this rhubarb plant in spring of 2010. So it's been 12 years, and just a few weeks ago there was nothing coming out of the ground. But as you can see today, it is really gigantic. Now, when I'm picking rhubarb, there's a few rules that I always follow. For one, it doesn't really matter how often I pick from my rhubarb plant. So some years I'll be in the kitchen and I'll want to make something with rhubarb, and I'll pick out exactly what I need, pick it, and bring it up. Other years, like this year, I'll only come out here probably once or twice, pick, chop it all, freeze it, and just for more efficiency's sake, do it that way. I try to be done picking from my rhubarb plant right around Memorial Day weekend. I try to stop picking from it. So it's kind of crazy because it's such a short season. Now, my rhubarb, I'm not sure which variety this is, but it is actually quite a bit more green than red, and red rhubarb is quite a bit sweeter than the green rhubarb. So if you can see the stems here, mine are a lot more green than they are red. But regardless, I think the thing about rhubarb is we're adding so much sugar or sweetness to it that it counteracts that sour anyways. So even though I try to pick our rhubarb in early spring, ours has also been bolting over here. And here's one seed pod, and I'm just gonna pop it off to show you. There's not too many because I've been popping them off as often as I see them. The point of these is to grow more seed. The plant itself wants to make more of it. So I don't want it to do that. I want it to focus more on growing the stems and growing that portion of the plant rather than the seed. So I always just pop these off and toss them. I don't think I see any more. Maybe I'll just show you a big one. So now the proper way to pick rhubarb is to actually go way down by the base and to pull the rhubarb out. And it just comes right out. This one's kind of big there. That's the proper way to do it. I'm going to be completely honest. Sometimes I use a knife or scissors just because it's easier. And my rhubarb has seemed to fare well doing it this way. Now, rhubarb has something in it called oxalic acid. And if you watch Matt's bee videos, you know he uses oxalic acid to treat the bees. It's actually kind of a poison. I think it's oxalates. That is in rhubarb. It's in all rhubarb. It's in small amounts in the stems, but large amounts in the leaves. So I've tried convincing Matt that there's got to be a way, and I have seen that there are people who treat their bees with rhubarb leaves, and I just find that really fascinating. But we aren't at that point, so for now we just compost our rhubarb leaves, and then we save the stems. The stems don't have too much of those oxalates in them. Those I think they just bind with like calcium in your body. You're more prone to kidney stones and things like that if you eat a ton of it. I don't think you can really eat too much rhubarb if you're just eating the stems. But what I'm going to try to harvest today is going to be no more than like a third to maybe half at most of our rhubarb plant. Now this one here, I actually picked quite a big stalk. Most of them aren't that large. I picked another large one. Oh, here's another seed pod. They're hiding. All of a sudden I'll come out here one day and they'll just be huge. think I've picked enough off our rhubarb plant. Some of the pieces I was picking actually ended up picking other ones. Another reason why I tend to use a knife or a scissors to cut it, just so I'm making sure I'm only pulling the ones I want. I did leave a few of these big leaves on here, but I leave mostly the smaller ones so that I can get a bigger harvest of rhubarb. And then this is probably all I will harvest off of it this year so I don't kill it. And this is my bowl. So I'm gonna go in the house and I'll show you how I get those cleaned up. Hi everyone, so whole nother day, wardrobe change. Got all that rhubarb cut up and I just put it in the fridge overnight. And today I'm going to be making that rhubarb cake. So that is what I am making with the rhubarb. Did I say that? Yeah. I'm gonna be making rhubarb cake. This is one of my favorite recipes and I thought it was like a secret, top secret recipe of someone's. And I got it from a family member who got it from a friend who found it from an online blog. So I think I'm okay to share it now, and I wish I knew exactly where it came from. It is rhubarb buttermilk cake, and it is just so delicious. It's a little time consuming, but so worth it. So I'm making the cake specifically for tomorrow. We are actually butchering chickens tomorrow, so we're gonna have cake, and it's also Matt's birthday, so I thought it would be nice to have some type of cake for that. I'll be sure to leave the recipe down below, but in case you don't catch it all. But I'm gonna be using 1.5 cups of this rhubarb. Now, usually when I freeze my rhubarb, I will freeze it in 2 or 2.5 cup portions approximately, because that's what most recipes call for. And I have used a 2 cup or 2.5 cup in this recipe and it's turned out fine. It just has a little bit more rhubarb in it. Now mine's a little bit more sour, but I have found that I don't need to make any changes to it because of this. So we're gonna need a few bowls because it's going to take a wet portion, a dry portion, and then there's a topping portion. Lots of stuff to do. So I am actually gonna get my buttermilk going first because I don't know if you're like me, but I love buttermilk recipes, but I don't make them often enough to make having buttermilk on hand worth it. So instead I'm gonna be making a quick version of it with just some milk and some vinegar. I believe you can use lemon juice too, but I always have vinegar on hand, so that's what I'm using. So it's gonna be 1/2 cup of buttermilk. And to make that 1/2 cup of kind of like a sour milk, I'm just going to use 1/2 tablespoon of vinegar, and then I'm gonna fill up to that 1/2 mark with milk. So there's not any extra liquid in it. I'm just gonna let that sit. Probably didn't see me pour that, but I'm just gonna let that sit while I'm working on everything else. So we're gonna toss our rhubarb with some sugar and let it sit for a while. I'm using about 1.5 cups of rhubarb. All right, and then I'm gonna mix it with 3 tablespoons of sugar. I'll start with the wet. Just wanna make sure I have a big enough bowl. I have not made this in for a couple months. I do use the frozen stuff for it sometimes, but this one turns out really good with fresh too. So it's something I do more this time of year. And then the frozen I tend to use a lot when I'm making like a crumble or rhubarb bars or something like that. I don't make rhubarb jam, maybe one day. It's 2 eggs. And I add some vanilla. This is that homemade vanilla. This is the vodka vanilla that I made. We did make that bourbon vanilla, I think last year, and it was really good, but I used it all up. And since I broke into this vodka vanilla, I actually need to make another batch. I have the vanilla beans, I have the vodka, just have to get it done. I just put it in that little bottle because it's so much more convenient. All right, we're gonna use 2/3 cup of sugar. This is where rhubarb gets its wrap with all the sugar in it. I'd love to get to the point in our house where we are completely supplementing our sugar with honey, but we're not there yet. I have a little bit of honey left from last year, and then hopefully we get some this year from the bees. 2/3 cup of butter. So I did make sure to set my butter out last night. Just kind of went through my recipe real quick and made sure I had everything. And I don't usually leave butter out anymore. We used to do that. Anybody else, when you need 2/3, cut 2 sticks? Like at the same point, like cut 1/3 and 1/3. It's just easier, right? Alright, so we've got butter, sugar, eggs, vanilla in there. Set this butter aside. And then I'm just going to mix it up. I am going to just use a fork. Funny story, my forks are actually from my grandparents. So anytime I'm using them for something atypical like baking, because I tend to use a fork often instead of a whisk, I think of them and think what they would think of me using a fork to whisk my baked goods. Alright, so it does end up kind of clumpy with that butter in there. If I was using a mixer, it obviously would not be this clumpy, but I'm just doing this real quick. Next bowl is going to have our dry ingredients, so it's going to have our flour and things. And I'm going to dump the wet into it. So I'm going to use a bigger bowl. Alright, 1.5 cups of flour. It's not all that much, is it? Forgot to turn my oven on. The oven is supposed to be preheated to 350 degrees. 1/4 cup it is. My dishwasher's kind of giving me a hard time, so I've got a lot of dirty dishes right now. Alright, 1.5 cups is flour. So I've got 1/4 cup, so we're going to need 6 of these. Just checking my math. 1. Judging my flour flattening skills here. 2. It's a proper technique to use a knife, right? 3. 4, 5, 6. Half a teaspoon of salt. I'm using the Redmond's real salt. I found I really do like it in baked goods. I've gone back and forth on if we like it in general at all or not. And it is a little more gritty than using pink Himalayan salt or something like that. 1 teaspoon of baking powder. An 1/8 teaspoon of soda, so that's hardly anything. I'm gonna see if I have a smaller measuring spoon. 1/8 teaspoon, perfect. And mix it again with my fork. Add the dry to the wet, it says, but I'm adding the wet to the dry. I think it just mixes in better when you do it the other way around. Then you don't worry about all this leftover stuff too. Oh well. I'm starting to wonder if I should have doubled this. I might be making another cake tonight, huh? I'm gonna have, I think about, in my head there's 14 people, but I can't remember exactly how many people are coming tomorrow, so I want to make sure I have enough for everybody. And we'll try to share some of what we're doing on butchering day on Thursday's vlog, but we try not to share too much because I know not everybody loves to see that, and then just share some of the details of it. All right. Next is our buttermilk. All right, we're gonna mix this up. We're gonna let our rhubarb and sugar sit while we make the topping. All right, so our topping is another 1/3 cup. Don't have quite enough with those 2 remainders, so here we go again. Cutting on the 1/3 cup line. Half a cup of flour. Half a cup of flour. Half a cup of sugar. Keep setting everything like right out of frame. All right, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. All right, butter, flour, sugar, cinnamon. Again, I had that butter at room temperature, so I put it out last night. I feel like there could be a whole name for this episode, like Crazy Cooking with Sarah. But anyways, there's lots of great ways that you can use rhubarb. I do want to play around with more using honey as a sweetener with it, but I just haven't gotten to that point. I would love to make maybe even like a freezer jam where it's made with honey, so that I can feel like it's safe and feel good about it, but I have not gotten to that point. And I've never made strawberry rhubarb jam because maybe it's just me, but by the time my strawberries come in, my rhubarb's done. So I'd either have to use frozen rhubarb or store strawberries, and I don't know. I just like using things at the same time. Same with strawberry rhubarb pie. I've never made it for the same reasons. It would either be not fresh rhubarb or store strawberries. Now, I'm sure if you were making it, your rhubarb has sat in your sugar a little bit longer. You might be able to tell, but it's getting like a tad runny here. Just kind of the juices are coming out of the rhubarb a little bit. I'm going to dump it right in my mixture here. Mix it in. I'm just kind of folding it. I'm using a fork, so it's not the smoothest. I could take out the right tool, but how many forks have I dirtied already? How many bowls? All right, I am gonna take a spatula out because I don't know how I'm gonna get it out of the pan otherwise. I'm gonna use one of my super soft butters to butter my pan. Which means I'm gonna use way more than I need to, right? I don't think there's such thing as too much butter. I think I'm done with this fork. All right, so I'm gonna put this in my pan. I'm using an 11 by 14 inch pan, and it's not too thick. And then the crumble is the best part. When I'm making it with the kids, I actually let them pick it up and just kind of throw it on top all over, and it's kind of therapeutic and fun. Hey, I got perfect timing because the oven just beeped. So I have my oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I am going to put this in for about 45 minutes. And then when it's done, I'm gonna have, hopefully, this golden crumble on the top of my delicious looking cake. All right, into the oven it goes. set a timer for 45 minutes. So then through the magic of television, hopefully I can take care of some of this like real quick and have that cake to show you in just a minute. Just like this. Isn't that lovely? My house isn't perfectly clean. Most of the dishes are washed. I just have to put them away. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. And glad you got to see me again. And I would love to know how you are using your rhubarb.